When the guns of World War II finally fell silent in 1945, the world believed peace had returned. Celebrations filled the streets. Soldiers came home. Flags rose in victory. But beneath the cheering crowds, another conflict had already begun. A quieter war. Colder, deeper, and far more dangerous. Within months, the same allies who defeated Hitler were turning into rivals, and the world was about to split in two. This is the story of how the greatest victory in human history created its next great nightmare. How the end of one world war planted the seeds for another kind of war, one fought not with bullets, but with fear, suspicion, and the constant shadow of nuclear destruction. Germany lay in ruins. Entire cities were piles of ash. Millions wandered homeless across a devastated continent. The Soviet Union had suffered unimaginable loss, over 20 million dead, whole regions burned to the ground. The United States, on the other hand, emerged with untouched industry, massive economic power, and a terrifying new weapon, the atomic bomb. Both sides had won the war, but neither saw the world the same way again. During the conflict, the alliance between the US, Britain, and the USSR was never built on trust, it was built on necessity. A temporary friendship to defeat a common enemy. Once Hitler was gone, the question became, what now? At the Yalta Conference in February 1945, the leaders of the Allied powers tried to answer that question. They spoke of liberated Europe, fair elections, and post-war cooperation. But key phrases were vague, promises unclear, and goals very different. What did free elections mean in a country occupied by Soviet troops? What did security mean to a nation like the USSR that had been invaded twice in 30 years? Both sides walked away, believing they had agreed on something, but not the same thing. By the time they met again at Potsdam in July 1945, the dynamic had changed dramatically. Roosevelt was dead. Truman had taken office. Churchill would soon be voted out mid-conference. Stalin, the only original leader still in power, watched the newcomers carefully. Tensions filled the room. Then, quietly, something else happened. Truman hinted that the United States possessed a powerful new weapon. Days later, Hiroshima and Nagasaki proved exactly what that meant. For the Soviets, the bomb wasn't just a weapon, it was a threat. A message. We don't need you anymore. And if the US had the bomb, the USSR needed something else for protection. Territory. Buffer zones. Control over its borders. For Stalin, safety meant domination. Across Eastern Europe, the Red Army had liberated nations from Nazi rule. But as the smoke cleared, Soviet influence hardened. Communist parties rose to power, sometimes through votes, often through pressure. In Poland, Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, and later Czechoslovakia, pro-Soviet governments appeared one after another. To the West, this looked like conquest. To the Soviets, it looked like survival. Then, in 1946, the world heard a phrase that would define an era. Winston Churchill declared, "An iron curtain has descended across the continent. Beneath that curtain lay countries controlled, influenced, or pressured by the US." To men in the West, this confirmed the fear. Stalin wasn't seeking peace, he was building an empire. That same year, American diplomat George Kennan sent a famous long telegram from Moscow. In it, he warned that the Soviet Union would never peacefully coexist with the West, and that only strong resistance, what he called containment, could stop Soviet expansion. His analysis reshaped American policy for decades. By 1947, the United States had made containment official. President Harry Truman announced a bold plan. The US would support any nation threatened by communism. Greece and Turkey became the first to receive massive American aid. And then came the Marshall Plan, one of the biggest economic recovery projects in history, pouring billions into rebuilding Western Europe. The Soviets refused the aid and ordered their satellite states to refuse it too. Europe wasn't just recovering, it was dividing. And nowhere was that divide clearer than Berlin. Deep inside Soviet-controlled East Germany lay a city split between four occupying powers. In 1948, Stalin tried to force the Western Allies out by blocking all road and rail access. The city of 2 million people was cut off from food, fuel, and medicine. Instead of retreating, the West responded with an unprecedented mission, the Berlin airlift. For almost a year, planes landed every few minutes, day and night, delivering supplies to keep the city alive. It was a massive victory for the West and a massive embarrassment for the Soviet Union. Soon after, Germany officially split into two states, East and West. The world's fault line had been drawn in 1949. The divide became permanent when the United States and its allies formed NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, a military alliance, promising that an attack on one member was an attack on all. In response, the Soviet Union would later form the Warsaw Pact, creating two massive military blocs facing each other across Europe, each preparing for a war that both sides hoped would never come. But while Europe settled into stalemate, other parts of the world erupted. In Asia, the Chinese Civil War ended in 1949 with communist victory, and in 1950, Korea exploded into the first major conflict of the Cold War. North Korea, supported by the USSR and China, invaded the South. The United States and United Nations intervened. For 3 brutal years, the two sides fought in frozen mountains, muddy trenches, and devastated cities. Millions ate, and the front lines barely moved. The war ended exactly where it started on the 38th parallelba. It sent a message. The Cold War could turn hot at any moment. Behind the scenes, a different kind of warfare was unfolding. Spies infiltrated embassies, governments, laboratories, and military bases. The CIA and KGB battled and shadowed covert operations, informants, double agents. Meanwhile, propaganda spread across radio waves, newspapers, film reels, and classrooms. Both sides fought to shape not just borders, but beliefs. As former colonies across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East gained independence, they were forced into a dangerous game of choosing sides. The United Nations became an arena where the world's blocs confronted each other with speeches, accusations, and vetoes. Every conflict, every election, every revolution seemed to carry echoes of the larger divide. The world had indeed split in two ends. Billions of people lived with the consequences. The Cold War lasted for decades. It brought the world to the edge of nuclear destruction more than once. It shaped politics, technology, culture, and conflict from Europe to the Pacific. And it all began the moment World War II ended. The alliance that defeated Hitler was never built to last. Victory didn't erase fear. It magnified it. Power shifted, trust shattered, and ideology filled the space between. So as we look back at the moment the world divided, we habit to ask, could it have been avoided? Could two superpowers victorious, yet wounded, strong yet insecure have chosen cooperation over confrontation? Or was the Cold War inevitable from the first moment peace was declared? Let me know in the comments. Do you think the Cold War could have been prevented? If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, make sure to like the video, share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more powerful stories from the past that still shape our world today.